You touched on a really important point there, Rich, because men and women do respond to stress differently. And it's really down to some part of our neurology. Our limbic system, which is the part of the brain that is involved with emotion and fear and, responding to things that make us concerned, is a lot more I wouldn't say hardwired, it's a lot more connected in the female brain for some reason versus the male brain. It seems that men find it easier to compartmentalize things versus women who don't find that as easy. And, we've had lots of evidence of that from scans, brain scans. We can see that the woman's brain seems to be more connected generally versus the male brain. And, women always say, well, that means we're smarter than men. It's not the case. We have complementary skills, and the male and the female brain are very much more similar than they are different. But the differences are really visible. And I'll give you an example. Just imagine your wife's worrying about something and she is concerned about this and she mentions it to you and she says, this is a concern for me. I don't know how to deal with it. And then next week she brings it up again. What the male in the relationship generally says, I thought you dealt with this. You spoke about this last week. And the woman goes, no, I'm actually still thinking about it. I haven't come to a conclusion. The female brain is much more likely to ruminate on something versus the male brain, because men like to deal with something, tick it off the box and off it goes. Whereas the female brain is still thinking, calculating, wondering, what about this scenario? What about that scenario? And so that is one of the reasons our response to stress is different to the male response to stress. And that leads me to the next point, because women are also much more prone to anxiety and depression than men are. And that's one of the reasons for that. One of the reasons, because we seem to ruminate on things for longer than men do. And, there are benefits and downsides to that. So that's just touching on the subject.
Yeah, that's good. There's a comedian and also a speaker that I adore. His name is Mark Gungor. And Mark has this whole thing about the difference between men's brains and women's brains. Have you seen it? Oh my goodness. It's the funniest thing ever. And it's so true, right? Yeah. It's the compartments. It's men's brains are in, everything is in a box and the boxes don't touch. And if we want to talk about something, we go to that box, and a woman's brain's made up of a bunch of wires and everything is connected to everything. And your car is connected to your kids and your kids are connected to your mom who lives in the basement. It just goes on and on and on. And it's so funny, but it's so realistic that we really do think we really handle stress differently. Why and how, or what is that step to help? Because obviously your specialty and the topic of today is how to calm the stressed female brain. So how do we start that process?
Well, I think the first thing we've touched on is that we need to firstly accept that there are differences, and those differences actually count, and we need to take them into account. And one of the ways to do that is to look at one of the reasons that we are overwhelmed as women. And those are called psychosocial factors. Now, this you can ask any woman. She feels she's juggling so many different things at the same time. She's involved with house care. She's involved with childcare. She's involved with maybe care of her parents. We've also termed this emotional load that women carry. Wives may remind husbands about their mother's birthdays and about gifts that need to be purchased and about events that need to be gone to. So women carry that load as well. And this is just the complexity of the society that we've created. Women do carry an extra load, even in terms of domestic care and domestic workload. They've done lots of time motion studies over the years, and that's just the case, unfortunately. So that's something that women generally feel overwhelmed by, all the tasks and responsibilities that they have to carry. The other really important thing to keep in mind is that women's hormones fluctuate over a month, significantly more than men's hormones fluctuate over a month. And, this is a topic that women hate to be reminded on. And I know that this is the case for me as well. I don't want anybody in my family to say, well, maybe it's a hormonal issue that you're getting so upset. But unfortunately, the science doesn't care about our feelings, and our estrogen and progesterone fluctuations impact serotonin and GABA synthesis in the brain, which means that during the times where those hormones fluctuate, our mood fluctuates as well. Now, if our hormones are completely out of sync, that means that serotonin and GABA synthesis are also going to be out of sync. So for women to assess their hormones and make sure that their hormones are functioning as well as possible is extremely important. Something else that needs to be taken into account, which I didn't go into a lot in my thesis, but later on I did more research into this. And this works for both genders. One of the things that we need to do to stop overwhelm and stop this feeling of stress that many people feel at the moment is to very, very critically examine what we can control in our lives and what we can't. And this is just me putting on my psychology hat for a moment, because it is very difficult to do that in today's world. There's so many things we can't control. And when the human brain, male or female, doesn't matter, experiences a feeling of stress where there is a lack of control attached to that stress, that is the worst kind of stress the brain can feel. You know, when the brain sees a problem, it first wants to look at what the solution is, what are the outcomes, what are the consequences, what can I do? Can I be active about solving this problem? A lot of the problems we have today, we have no control over, and the brain hates that. So from a psychological perspective, to sit down and say, okay, these are all the things that are concerning me. What percentage of those things do I have control over? And let me focus on them, not the ones I can't control. So those are some strategies for women to use going forwards in relation to this brain of ours that does seem to be more connected, you know, than the male brain.